you think looks acceptable to people watching this morning?
I think the important thing is, you know, somebody allowed me to stay at their apartment for a few days.
No fun not having money. It's no fun if your fridge freezer breaks and you've got no means of replacing it, or your kids come over.
Angela Rayner claims there's plenty of housing and not enough housing in the same breath. You read that right. In a jaw-dropping display of contradiction, Labour's second-in-command left viewers scratching their heads.
Morning, is you went to New York with someone who was then another Labour MP, Sam Tarry. The rules state that this needs to be registered.
We did that, so we do that, and we are ready. We've been working really hard since Keir took over as leader and me in deputy, and we've got Rachel as the...
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video, but it gets worse. As Laura Kuenssberg pressed on, Rayner's responses became increasingly incoherent. What other bombshells did this interview reveal?
I felt I should declare it, and I did declare it.
But you were accepting accommodation from a wealthy Labour donor, whether they were a friend or not.
Ending fire and rehire, and we will bring in basic rights from day one on the job.
Let's dive into the political train wreck that's got everyone talking. Laura Kuenssberg kicked off the interview with seemingly innocuous questions about Labour's housing plans. Angela Rayner, exuding confidence, outlined the party's ambitious target of building 1.5 million homes by 2029. It sounded impressive on paper, but as Kuenssberg dug deeper, the cracks in Rayner's facade began to show. The BBC journalist probed into the logistics and feasibility of such a grand scheme. How would Labour fund this massive undertaking?
If it was part or all of the visit was paid for by someone else, and you didn't register that, so you weren't transparent about that, did you?
What about the implementation process? Rayner's responses grew increasingly vague. She struggled to provide concrete details, leaving viewers wondering if there was any substance behind the lofty promises. As the interview progressed, Kuenssberg highlighted a glaring contradiction. Labour had been vocal about the housing crisis, yet Rayner's statements seemed to paint a different picture. The tension in the studio was palpable as Rayner attempted to clarify her position, but instead of clearing the air, she only muddied the waters further. Then came the moment that left viewers stunned. In a spectacular display of cognitive dissonance, Rayner declared, "There is plenty of housing already." But mere moments later, she contradicted herself, stating, "There's not enough housing for the people that desperately need it." The inconsistency was impossible to ignore. This contradiction raised serious questions about Labour's understanding of the housing crisis.
And I went beyond the rules is because that person had donated to my deputy leadership, who happens to be a friend, but is a politician in their own right.
The last 183 years, the strength and the character of the people of my constituency has not changed.
How could they effectively address a problem they couldn't seem to define? Experts were quick to point out the logistical challenges of Labour's plan. The target of 1.5 million homes seemed increasingly unrealistic in the face of lengthy planning applications and financial constraints on local councils. Moreover, the UK is expecting an influx of 2.5 million immigrants during the same period. This raises concerns about the allocation of these new homes. How many would go to newcomers versus local residents in need? Rayner's interview failed to address these crucial questions. Critics have noted that Labour's housing policy lacks coherence. It fails to consider the necessary infrastructure and services required to support such a large increase in housing. With existing budget cuts to local councils, where would the resources come from?
Well, first of all, I was on holiday in New York. I paid for my holiday in New York, but as friends do, a friend allowed me to stay. I often allow people to stay at mine.
Ever amount for sustainable food production in the UK, and it's alongside £60 million, Mr. Speaker, to support.
Rayner's inability to provide answers only fueled skepticism about Labour's readiness to tackle the housing crisis. As the interview concluded, it was clear that Rayner's credibility had taken a significant hit. Her evasive responses and contradictory statements left viewers questioning not just her competence, but the entire Labour Party's ability to address one of the UK's most pressing issues. The implications of this policy confusion extend far beyond a single interview, potentially shaping the future of Labour's leadership and their electoral prospects.
We will return politics to the service of the people. What part of returning politics to the service of the people involves accepting free aid?
If Rayner's fumbling on housing policy raised eyebrows, what came next left jaws on the floor. Kuenssberg had an ace up her sleeve, one that would expose a glaring contradiction between Rayner's words and actions. Could the Labour MP talk her way out of this one? As the interview shifted gears, Kuenssberg turned her focus to Rayner's personal conduct and transparency. The BBC journalist brought up Rayner's recent trip to New York, where she had accepted accommodation from a wealthy Labour donor. The problem? Rayner hadn't declared this arrangement, raising serious questions about her commitment to transparency. Rayner, caught off guard, attempted to justify her actions. She claimed, "I think I was overly transparent because I think it was important," but her words rang hollow as Kuenssberg presented evidence that contradicted this assertion. The rules are clear. MPs must register any visit where part or all of the costs are covered by someone else. Rayner's failure to do so wasn't just an oversight. It was a direct violation of parliamentary standards. As Kuenssberg pressed for answers, Rayner's responses became increasingly defensive and evasive.
Part of returning politics to the service of the people involved you accepting a free stay in a New York apartment on a holiday.
The Tories handed billions of pounds to their cronies with links to tax havens. We will ensure local businesses.
The Labour MP's earlier confidence crumbled, replaced by a palpable discomfort. The interview's tone shifted dramatically from a policy discussion to a stark examination of personal accountability. This incident mirrors past controversies involving other politicians, where failure to declare gifts led to public backlash and diminished trust. Rayner's situation is particularly damaging, given her party's emphasis on integrity and transparency. The contradiction between her words and actions couldn't be more stark. Public opinion on political transparency has grown increasingly critical in recent years. Many voters expressed deep skepticism about politicians who accept gifts or accommodations from donors, viewing such arrangements as potential conflicts of interest.
Break the rules.
Well, first of all, I didn't go to New York with another person. That person went to New York and I met up with them, and I met up with a number of friends while I was in New York. It was...
Rayner's failure to disclose her New York accommodations plays directly into these concerns, potentially eroding trust not just in her, but in the Labour Party as a whole. As the interview concluded, it was clear that Rayner's credibility had taken a severe hit. Her inability to provide clear answers and the inconsistencies in her story left viewers questioning her integrity. This debacle doesn't just reflect poorly on Rayner. It highlights the internal divisions within the Labour Party and contributes to perceptions of incoherent leadership. The implications of this interview extend far beyond a single politician's missteps. It raises serious questions about Labour's readiness to govern and their ability to present a united front.
The turning point when people and places across England finally begin to take back control over the things that matter to them.
On the side hasn't offered him a peerage, I certainly would have. And Mr. Speaker, the definition of working people are the people that the Tory...
As the dust settles, one can't help but wonder, how will this affect Labour's electoral prospects? And what does it mean for the future of political accountability in the UK? Angela Rayner's interview with Laura Kuenssberg has left Labour reeling. The deputy leader's contradictory statements on housing policy and her failure to disclose a donor-funded trip have dealt a severe blow to the party's credibility. Rayner's fumbling responses and evasive tactics exposed a worrying lack of coherence in Labour's approach to key issues. The fallout from this disastrous interview could have far-reaching consequences for Labour's electoral prospects. Voters may question the party's readiness to govern, especially given the stark contrast between their promises of transparency and Rayner's actions. The incident has also highlighted internal divisions within Labour, raising doubts about their ability to present a united front. As the dust settles, we're left wondering, can Labour recover from this setback? More importantly, will this spark a much-needed conversation about political accountability in the UK? The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether this is a turning point for British politics or just another scandal that fades into obscurity.